As the Mo. Chris Stirewalt, longtime political reporter and columnist, joining us from the nation's capital. Let's look forward, Chris. If Glenn Youngkin wins, where does the Republican Governors Association look forward to in 2022?
Well, the Republicans did pretty well they haven't struggled there. That hasn't been their problem. And as a matter of fact, the ability of Republicans to hold on to the gubernatorial level, and I don't believe they lost a single state house or even maybe a chamber of a state house in 2020, even as Donald Trump lost. So they've remained strong on that level. And part of the way that they have remained strong has been by having candidates that match the state, right? So Maryland, Massachusetts has a Republican governor. They don't have the same kind of governor they'd elect in Alabama, but they have a Republican governor. And that's really what it comes down to. Politics is very nationalized now. That's true, and I've long talked about that as the dominant truth of American political life today. All these issues become national, but you've got to tailor to your state, and you've got to tailor to the issue set in your state. And the Republicans chose really wisely in Virginia with Glenn Youngkin, who a lot of people didn't give a chance starting out.
He used to make this joke on the trail. He made it with us last night that when he started, his name ID was 2%, and the poll had a margin of error of 3%. So you can see where he has come since then, now a household name nationally. You want to talk about tailoring to issues. Number one issue, and we've said this in the Virginia governor's race, is education. Kristen Soltis Anderson says that hasn't been the case since 2000. And you got to look really as education is this proxy for so many other things. Does that prove true, and is that a pathway for Republicans in 2022, or is this lightning in a bottle?
So it is certainly true that there are some subliminal messages, or not subliminal, but there are some Soto voice mentions when Youngkin is talking about education. Yes, there is critical race theory. Yes, there is the culture war stuff. Yes, there are those components, certainly, that help him connect to voters in Western and Southern Virginia that are maybe suspicious of a more Mitt Romneyite kind of candidate who prefer a more Donald Trumpy kind of candidate. But here is what makes it, when we talk about the education issue in Virginia now and in midterms next year, we're talking about coronavirus. And we're talking about the teachers' unions. Terry McAuliffe's in a dreadful position on this. He relies on the teachers' union to get out the vote for support. He relies on those unions for contributions, for all of that he needs. It is really government worker unions are the backbone of the Democratic Party in Virginia and in most states. So what happens when parents are incredibly frustrated with the terrible job that schools did educating kids in Virginia in 2020 and how long they stayed shut down, how many families were really suffering under this, and they see the Democratic Party as beholden to these teachers' unions and unwilling to confront them about poor performance and their failure during coronavirus. That puts McAuliffe between the Democratic-leaning families, moms and dads of Northern Virginia, and the teachers' union that are part of the backbone of his operation. That's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, and McAuliffe clearly chose the teachers' unions because after his gaffe, if you will, or admission saying that parents shouldn't be involved, he's now turned to saying, oh, no, I believe in the teachers, and sort of ignoring the parents. You make a great point, though, in that the backbone of the Democratic Party has also really come out for Terry McAuliffe. Youngkin has said, I'm going this alone. Listen to McAuliffe talk about who showed up here in Virginia over the past couple of weeks.
We've had great surrogates. I was very proud to have President Obama, President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Stacey Abrams, Dave Matthews, Farrell. I'll take my surrogates over Donald Trump any day of the week.
Is he going to come to regret if he loses having had President Biden and President Obama show up so much?
No, you can't keep them away. It's worse if they don't come. Donald Trump's not coming is a story, right? And especially if the sitting president doesn't come, then it's a problem. Well, what's the deal here? And there are some voters who connect to Biden. There's certainly a lot of voters in Virginia that connect to Barack Obama. Stacey Abrams is a little more problematic, but we can also look at the other side of this coin. The best news for Glenn Youngkin is that no one is coming. right? The best, because there are no Republicans other than the in-state Republicans, right? He could have former Governor Bob McDonnell, maybe. He could have those guys, but there's no national Republican who could help him in Virginia, and that speaks to what's the state of the red team in Virginia these days, and how Youngkin has to run as a one-off, like governors in Republicans in Maryland or Michigan or in Massachusetts.
Yeah, you talk about how unique Virginia is. Speaking of the story of President Trump not coming, we're heading there next. Chris, thank you.
You bet.
Trump, Donald Trump, Trump.
Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.